The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with golden light and quiet pride. Tall crystal beings stood beside armored reptilian generals. Thin gray diplomats watched from floating seats high above the floor. In the center of the chamber, a massive hologram of Earth rotated slowly. Blue oceans shimmered. White clouds drifted peacefully. Red targeting markers blinked across the planet's surface. To the Council, those red lights meant victory. After 12 long cycles of war, they believed humanity was finally finished. The High Chancellor, an ancient being with silver skin and glowing eyes, stepped forward. His voice echoed through the chamber. He spoke calmly, as if announcing something small and unimportant. "Today," he said, raising his hand, "the threat of humanity ends." Applause filled the hall. Glasses made of crystal and metal were lifted high. The Council had feared humans at first. Humans were small compared to many species. They were new to the galactic stage, but they were unpredictable. They fought harder than expected. They adapted quickly. They refused to surrender even when surrounded. Still, in the end, numbers and power had crushed them, or so the Council believed. The hologram changed to show images from the last battle above Mars. Human ships exploded in silence. Defense stations burned. Escape pods drifted into the dark. The Council watched the replay with satisfaction. Reports had confirmed it. Earth's outer colonies had gone silent. Human supply lines had collapsed. Their main fleets were destroyed near Jupiter and Saturn. No reinforcements were detected. No hidden bases were found. Every calculation showed the same result. Humanity had no way to continue the war. The Chancellor lifted a crystal glass filled with bright liquid. "To the end of humanity," he declared. The entire chamber repeated his words. "To the end of humanity." They drank. For a brief moment, there was only celebration. Laughter echoed against the golden walls. Some leaders were already discussing how they would divide human territory. Others spoke about mining Earth's oceans and claiming its resources. They believed the war was over. Then the doors of the Grand Chamber opened suddenly. A young communications officer rushed inside. His uniform was dark blue, marked with the Council's emblem. He stopped near the center of the room and bowed quickly, but his hands were shaking. The celebration grew quiet. The Chancellor looked at him with cold eyes. "You interrupt a historic moment," the Chancellor said slowly. "Speak carefully." The officer swallowed. "My lords, we are detecting unusual readings near the Sol system." A few members exchanged amused looks. "Residual explosions," one general said. "Human debris." The officer shook his head. "No, sir. These are warp signatures." The room became still. Warp signatures meant ships entering space faster than light. The Chancellor's voice hardened. "Human ships cannot warp. Their fleets were destroyed." The officer looked at the hologram. "That is what we believed." The image of Earth flickered. Space near the edge of the system began to ripple like disturbed water. A bright line tore across the darkness. Then another, and another. Silence spread across the chamber like a shadow. The red targeting markers disappeared as the system automatically zoomed out. Large distortions formed in empty space beyond Pluto. The officer whispered, "Multiple warp entries confirmed." The first tear in space opened fully. From it emerged a massive warship. It was larger than anything the Council had recorded from humanity before. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, covered in heavy armor plates. Blue engine lights burned like stars at its rear. The symbol of Earth, a simple blue and white globe, was painted across its side. Before anyone could speak, more warp tiers opened. Dozens, then hundreds. The hologram struggled to track them all. Ships poured into the system in organized formation. Battleships, carriers, cruisers, support vessels. Thousands of them. The Council chamber was completely silent now. No one moved. No one breathed. The Chancellor slowly lowered his empty glass. It slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound echoed loudly in the quiet hall. "Impossible," one diplomat whispered. Their fleet was destroyed. The officer's voice trembled as new data filled the screens. "Energy levels are full. Weapons are active. Shield strength is beyond previous human capacity. A reptilian warlord stepped forward, his claws tight. Scan them. Identify command signals. The hologram zoomed closer to the largest ship at the center of the formation. It dwarfed the others. Its surface was marked with new symbols, unknown to the Council. Suddenly, a transmission signal appeared. It was clear and strong. It cut through every Council frequency without resistance. The chamber lights dimmed as the hologram shifted to show a human face. A woman in a dark uniform stared forward. Her expression was calm. Her eyes showed no fear. "This is Admiral Elena Hayes of the United Human Armada," she said in steady, simple words. There was no anger in her voice, no shouting, only certainty. You believed humanity was defeated. Behind her, through the bridge window, thousands of human warships could be seen stretching across space like a steel ocean. The Admiral continued, "You destroyed our cities. You attacked our colonies. You thought we had nothing left." The Chancellor stepped closer to the hologram. For the first time in many cycles, doubt entered his eyes. "Where did this fleet come from?" he demanded, though he knew she could not hear him yet. The Admiral's lips moved again, as if she sensed his question. "While you watched our borders," she said calmly, "we built beyond your sight." The hologram shifted to show distant regions of space far outside known trade routes. Hidden shipyards floated near dark stars. Massive construction platforms surrounded secret planets. Humans in thousands of ships worked together in silence. "We learned from every defeat," Admiral Hayes continued. "We adapted. We prepared." The Council members felt something they had not felt in a long time. Fear. The Admiral gave one final statement. "You celebrated too early." The transmission ended. The hologram returned to the image of Earth. But now Earth was no longer surrounded by red markers. It was surrounded by a wall of human warships. The officer looked at the Chancellor, waiting for orders. No one spoke. The celebration had turned into dread. Outside the Sol system, the human armada adjusted formation. Engines burned brighter. Weapons powered up. And across the galaxy, the war that the Council believed was over was about to begin again, stronger and more dangerous than ever before. The Grand Chamber remained silent long after the human transmission ended. No one moved. No one spoke. The image of thousands of human warships still filled the hologram. The blue glow of their engines shined like a wall of cold fire around Earth. The High Chancellor slowly returned to his seat, but his posture was no longer proud. His mind raced through every report he had received during the war. Every scout message. Every intelligence update. All of them had said the same thing. Humanity had no fleet left. Their shipyards were destroyed. Their resources were gone. Yet the proof now floated in front of him. "Explain this," the Chancellor said quietly. His voice was no longer filled with celebration. It was sharp and cold. The communications officer swallowed and began reading new data appearing across his console. Energy readings suggest these ships were constructed recently. Their reactor design is different from previous human models. Their shield strength is nearly 40% higher than recorded human maximum levels. A reptilian warlord slammed his clawed fist against the floor. "That is impossible. We blockaded their trade routes. We monitored their systems. They had no materials to build such a fleet." A thin gray diplomat leaned forward. "Unless," he said slowly, "we were watching the wrong place." The chamber grew quiet again. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "Search beyond their outer colonies," he ordered. "Scan the deep sectors. Every uncharted region." The hologram shifted as scanners reached farther into space. For a moment, there was nothing. Then small signals appeared. Weak at first, then stronger. The display revealed massive industrial structures hidden in dark regions between stars. Giant platforms floated near dying suns. Asteroid belts had been hollowed out from the inside. Entire shipyards were concealed within nebula clouds where sensors were distorted. The officer's hands trembled. These facilities are old. Some were active for many cycles. A murmur spread through the Council. The humans had not simply rebuilt. They had prepared long before their final battles. They had planned for defeat. The Chancellor remembered the early days of the war. Humans had fought fiercely at first. They defended every colony with extreme force. But after several cycles, their strategy had changed. They began retreating more often. They abandoned certain systems without heavy resistance. At the time, the Council believed it was proof of weakness. Now it looked like something else. A strategy. Replay the battles near Jupiter, the Chancellor commanded. The hologram obeyed. It showed the destruction of what the Council believed was the last major human fleet. Human ships exploded in bright flashes. Council forces celebrated victory in orbit. But as the image slowed down, something strange became clear. Many human ships had self-destructed in perfect synchronization. Others had retreated at the same moment, disappearing into warp before final engagement. The great diplomat spoke softly. They were not fighting to win. The Chancellor finished the thought. They were fighting to distract us. Silence fell again. The humans had allowed the Council to believe they were desperate. They showed damaged ships. They broadcast weak signals. They let rumors spread that their government was collapsing. But behind that image of chaos, they were building something massive. The officer looked at another screen. "There is more," he said nervously. "Several minor species near the outer rim have gone silent during the last cycles." The reptilian warlord growled. "Irrelevant primitive races." "Not primitive," the officer corrected carefully. "Resource suppliers. Mining species. Transport guilds. They disappeared from our trade records at the same time humans retreated." The Chancellor's eyes widened slightly. "They helped humanity," he said. It made sense now. The Council had ignored smaller species, believing they had no power. Humans had not ignored them. Humans had formed quiet agreements. Trade for protection. Technology for loyalty. While the Council focused on destroying human warships, humans were building alliances in silence. The hologram shifted again to show the present. The human armada remained in perfect formation around Earth. They were not attacking. Not yet. It was as if they were waiting, studying, watching. The Chancellor felt something he had not felt in many cycles. He felt outplayed. "Open communication channels," he ordered. "Demand explanation." The officer sent the signal, but before the Council could speak, another human transmission arrived. Admiral Hayes appeared once more. Her face was calm. "We know you were scanning," she said simply. "Yes. We built beyond your sight. Yes. We formed alliances you never noticed. You saw our retreat as weakness. It was preparation." The reptilian warlord stepped toward the hologram. "You lost entire fleets," he shouted. "Millions of your kind died." The Admiral's expression did not change. "We remember every loss," she said quietly. "That is why we prepared properly." The transmission ended again. The chamber felt colder than before. The Council realized the truth was worse than simple survival. Humanity had changed. The new ships were larger, stronger, and built with unified design. This was not a desperate species fighting to survive. This was a species that had learned from pain. The Chancellor stood slowly. "Mobilize all remaining fleets," he commanded. "Recall defensive units from the outer systems. Fortify the inner sectors." Around him, Council leaders began issuing orders. Panic spread quietly through military channels. But as reports returned, another problem became clear. Many Council fleets were far from the core systems. They had spread out to occupy former human colonies. Supply lines were long. Reinforcements would take time. Meanwhile, the human armada was already in position. The officer looked up from his console with pale skin. "Human ships are moving," he whispered. The hologram zoomed closer. The massive fleet began to shift formation. Carriers moved to the center. Battleships spread outward in defensive lines. Smaller ships formed escort patterns with perfect coordination. Their movements were smooth and disciplined. Not rushed, not chaotic. It was the movement of a force that knew exactly what it was doing. A final signal appeared on the main screen. No video this time, only text. Simple and clear. Phase 2 begins now. The Chancellor stared at those words. He understood at last that the war they thought had ended was only the first phase. Humanity had allowed the Council to believe in victory. They had allowed the galaxy to think they were broken. But in the darkness beyond known space, they had rebuilt something far greater than before. And now, as thousands of human warships advanced slowly beyond Earth's orbit, the Council understood a terrible truth. Humanity had never intended to survive quietly. They had intended to return stronger. Across the Sol system, the human Armada moved with calm precision. Their formation shifted like a single living mind. Battleships rotated into defensive arcs. Carriers released waves of small escort fighters that formed tight shields around the larger vessels. Supply ships positioned themselves safely behind the main line. Every movement was smooth and controlled. Inside the Grand Chamber, the Galactic Council watched in growing fear. The High Chancellor stood with his hands behind his back, staring at the hologram. He had ruled through logic and calculation for many cycles, but this situation did not follow his predictions. Humanity was not acting with rage. They were acting with discipline. "Why do they wait?" one council member asked quietly. The reptilian warlord growled. "They gather strength for attack." But the gray diplomat shook his head. "No, they want us to move first." In a distant part of space, near the edge of the Sol system, a council defense fleet was already stationed. It was not their strongest fleet, but it was large enough to finish what they believed was a dying enemy. Hundreds of alien warships turned toward the incoming human formation. Their commanders received orders from the Council to hold position and prepare to fire. The Council expected panic from the humans. They expected rushed movement or scattered attacks. Instead, the human fleet slowed down. Their ships formed a perfect wall in space. Then something strange happened. From behind the main formation, dozens of small ships detached and moved forward alone. They were lighter vessels, fast and narrow. The Council scanners detected weak energy signatures. "Scouts," the reptilian warlord said with confidence. "Destroy them." The alien fleet fired a long-range volley. Bright beams of energy cut across space and struck the approaching ships. Explosions flashed. The small vessels were destroyed easily. The warlord gave a satisfied nod. "See? They test us like amateurs." But the gray diplomat's eyes remained fixed on the data. "Those ships carried no heavy weapons," he said slowly. "They carried transmitters." At that moment, the human main fleet adjusted position. The small destroyed vessels had sent precise coordinates before they were eliminated. The larger human battleships now locked onto exact weak points in the alien defense line. Admiral Elena Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical display. Her officers spoke calmly around her. Targeting complete. Enemy shield frequency analyzed. Phase alignment achieved. She gave a single order. Execute. In perfect synchronization, hundreds of human battleships fired at once. Not wildly, not randomly. Every beam struck a specific section of the alien fleet. Instead of spreading damage across many ships, they focused on shield generators and command vessels. The first line of alien defense collapsed in seconds. Shock spread through the council chamber. On the hologram, several council warships exploded almost at the same time. Their shields failed instantly because human weapons had matched their frequency precisely. The reptilian warlord roared in anger. "How do they know our shield codes?" The officer quickly checked the data. His voice trembled. "They studied us. Every battle, every engagement. They adjusted their weapons after each defeat." The truth became clear. Humanity had not wasted their earlier losses. Each battle they lost had given them information. They recorded shield patterns, weapon cycles, fleet formations. They had retreated not in panic, but in calculation. On the battlefield, the remaining alien ships tried to regroup, but the human fleet did not give them time. Fast attack cruisers broke formation and flanked for both sides. They targeted engines and communication arrays. Alien ships began drifting powerless through space. The human fighters swarmed around them, but did not fire randomly. They disabled weapons without destroying hulls when possible. It was controlled and intentional. Back in the Grand Chamber, fear began turning into something worse. Respect mixed with dread. They fight smarter than before. the gray diplomat whispered. They fight together. Another council member pointed at the screen. Look at their spacing. There is no confusion, no overlap. They move like one mind. The Chancellor understood something important in that moment. The humans had solved one of their old weaknesses. In early battles, human fleets sometimes showed emotional reactions. They charged aggressively. They broke formation to save damaged ships. But now, there was no such disorder. Every movement was calculated. Every sacrifice served a purpose. The alien defense fleet attempted a final counterattack. They launched heavy plasma torpedoes toward the center of the human line. For a brief second, it seemed like the humans were exposed. But then several human ships shifted position, intercepting the torpedoes with layered shield barriers. The explosions lit up space, but the human line remained unbroken. Admiral Hayes watched calmly. "Advance," she ordered. The human armada moved forward together. Within minutes, the Council defense fleet was either destroyed or drifting powerless. Human ships surrounded the survivors but did not finish them. Instead, they transmitted a simple message on open frequency. Retreat and live. Continue and be destroyed. Many alien captains chose retreat. The survivors fled back toward Council space. In the Grand Chamber, silence returned once more. The first defensive line had fallen faster than anyone expected. The reptilian warlord looked furious, but even he understood the truth. This was not luck. This was preparation. The officer turned toward the Chancellor again. Human fleet is not stopping. They are leaving Earth orbit. The hologram zoomed out to show the human armada moving away from the Sol system in organized waves. They were not defending anymore. They were advancing. The Chancellor's voice was heavy. Their target. The officer hesitated before answering. Based on trajectory, they are heading toward the inner Council trade routes. That meant something terrible. The humans were not attacking randomly. They were cutting supply lines first. They were isolating Council worlds before any direct assault. The gray diplomat closed his eyes briefly. "They learned our strategy," he said softly. The Chancellor finally spoke with clear understanding. "No," he corrected. "They improved it." As the human armada disappeared into warp in perfect formation, the Council realized that the balance of power had shifted completely. Humanity was no longer the desperate species fighting for survival. They had become a calculated force moving step by step toward the heart of the galaxy. And this was only the beginning of Phase 2. 3 stars burned brightly over the Trine system, their light mixing together in waves of red, gold, and white. It was one of the most important junctions in Council space. Trade routes crossed there. Military supply lines passed through its gates. Whoever controlled Trine controlled movement between the outer colonies and the inner core worlds. The Galactic Council knew this, and now so did humanity. After leaving the Sol system, the human armada did not rush blindly toward the Council capital. Instead, they moved directly toward Trine. Inside the Grand Chamber, the High Chancellor watched the hologram with deep concern. "They understand our structure," he said quietly. "They're cutting our arteries before striking the heart." The reptilian warlord had already positioned a powerful defense fleet at Trine. Unlike the earlier fleet near Sol, this one was fully prepared. Hundreds of heavy cruisers formed a defensive ring around the system's 3 warp gates. Massive orbital platforms floated near the largest star, armed with long-range cannons. Mines were hidden between the planets. The warlord spoke with confidence. "Let them come. This time we are ready." Hours later, space near the outer edge of Trine began to ripple. Human warp signatures appeared like distant lightning. One by one, dark human warships emerged from faster-than-light travel. Their engines glowed blue against the light of the 3 suns. But they did not charge forward. They stopped at long range and spread into a wide formation. On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Elena Hayes studied the battlefield display. She had chosen Trine carefully. The 3 suns created unstable gravity waves that interfered with long-range targeting. Council forces depended heavily on predictive firing systems. The unstable gravity would reduce their accuracy. "All fleets hold position," she ordered calmly. Phase 1 begins. Several human ships move forward slightly and launch small drones. The drones scattered across the system, weaving between asteroid fragments and orbiting debris. Council scanners detected them instantly. Minor surveillance devices, one alien officer reported. The reptilian warlord gave the command to fire. Long beams of plasma energy cut through space, destroying many drones. But others slipped through. As they moved, they transmitted constant data back to the human fleet. They mapped minefields. They recorded shield frequencies of orbital platforms. They tracked power flow between Council ships. The warlord smiled as another group of drones exploded. They waste resources again. But he did not see what Admiral Hayes saw. The drones were not meant to survive. They were meant to gather information for just a few seconds. That was enough. Shield harmonics identified, a human officer reported. Weakness detected between platforms 3 and 4. Hayes nodded. Strike Group Delta, advance. A group of human cruisers accelerated suddenly, moving in a tight arrow formation. They headed straight toward the gap between two orbital platforms. Council forces responded immediately. Heavy cannons fired. Energy beams flashed across space. 2 human cruisers were hit and exploded in brilliant light. The rest did not slow down. Instead, they adjusted course slightly, using the unstable gravity between the 3 suns to bend their path unexpectedly. Council targeting systems struggled to compensate. As the human cruisers reached the identified weak point, they fired a concentrated burst of energy at the exact moment when the orbital platform's shields shifted phase. The first platform's shield flickered and collapsed. The second platform lost power seconds later. Both structures were destroyed in rapid explosions. The defensive ring now had a hole. Reinforce the gap, the reptilian warlord roared. Council ships rushed forward to close the breach. But at that exact moment, the main body of the human armada advanced. Battleships formed layered lines. Carriers released hundreds of fighters that moved like swarms of metal birds. Instead of attacking randomly, they targeted engines and communication relays. Several Council ships lost coordination instantly. In the center of the battlefield, Captain Marcus Reed commanded one of the human battleships, the UHS Resolute. He watched calmly as enemy ships approached. Maintain formation, he ordered. Fire on my mark. A massive Council cruiser broke through the chaos and aimed directly at the Resolute. Its weapons charged with intense light. Incoming heavy fire, a human officer warned. Reed did not panic. Angle shields 20 degrees. Prepare counterburst. The alien cruiser fired. The Resolute's shields absorbed most of the impact, though sparks flew across its surface. Immediately, Reed gave the order. The Resolute fired a focused beam directly into the alien ship's engine core, the location already identified by earlier drone scans. The cruiser split apart in a violent explosion. Around them, similar scenes unfolded. Human ships did not chase fleeing enemies. They stayed in formation and removed threats methodically. The 3 suns cast long shadows across the battlefield, reflecting off broken hulls and drifting debris. Within an hour, the Council defense fleet was in disarray. Several of their command ships had been destroyed early in the battle. Without central coordination, smaller groups fought alone. Some attempted retreat through the warp gates, but human ships had already positioned themselves to block escape routes. In the Grand Chamber, silence filled the air once again. The hologram showed Council losses rising quickly. The reptilian warlord's earlier confidence faded. They predicted our response, he said slowly. The gray diplomat replied, they shaped it. Back at Tryon, Admiral Hayes observed the final stage of the battle. Secure the warp gates, she commanded. Human vessels moved carefully into position around the 3 massive gates. Engineers began disabling control systems rather than destroying them. Hayes had no interest in random destruction. She wanted control. Within 2 hours, the Battle of 3 Suns was over. The Tryon system, once a proud symbol of Council strength, now stood under human control. Human ships formed a defensive ring around the gates. Council survivors retreated deeper into their territory, broadcasting urgent warnings. On the bridge of her flagship, Hayes allowed herself a single quiet breath. This victory was important, but it was only one step. She opened a secure channel to all human commanders. Tryon secured. Prepare for next phase. In the Grand Chamber, the High Chancellor stared at the hologram, watching the human emblem appear over the Tryon system. He finally understood the scale of the threat. Humanity was not simply retaliating. They were advancing with purpose, cutting key systems one by one. And with the fall of Tryon, the path toward the Council's inner worlds was now open. The fall of the Tryon system sent shockwaves across the Galactic Council's inner worlds. Trade ships stopped mid-route. Civilian transports changed direction in panic. Military channels were filled with urgent signals. For the first time in many cycles, the Council was not discussing expansion or conquest. They were discussing survival. Inside the Grand Chamber, the golden light now felt cold and distant. The High Chancellor stood in silence as reports continued to arrive. The hologram displayed a clear image of the Tryon warp gates, now surrounded by human warships. The emblem of Earth glowed steadily on every ship hull. It was not a symbol of desperation anymore. It was a symbol of control. The reptilian warlord paced across the chamber floor, his heavy claws striking the polished surface. We underestimated them, he admitted with visible anger. But they cannot hold Tryon for long. We still outnumber them. The gray diplomat remained seated, his thin fingers resting together calmly. Numbers are meaningless without position, he replied softly. They now control our supply lines. That was the real fear spreading through the Council. The Tryon system connected the outer military sectors to the core industrial planets. Without it, reinforcement fleets would take much longer to arrive. Resources would move slowly. Coordination would weaken. Humanity had not attacked the strongest world. They had attacked the most important intersection. What do they want? One council member asked nervously. Revenge. Another responded, they want dominance. The Chancellor finally spoke. No, they want leverage. The rune grew quiet at his words. Leverage meant negotiation. It meant pressure without immediate destruction. Humanity was not burning worlds. They were capturing positions. They were forcing the Council into a defensive mindset. Another signal appeared on the main display. A human transmission request. The chamber hesitated. The Chancellor gave a slow nod. Accepted. Admiral Elena Hayes appeared once again on the hologram. Her expression remained calm and steady. Behind her, the bridge of her flagship moved with quiet efficiency. Officers worked without shouting. No signs of chaos. Galactic Council, she began, her voice simple and direct. The Tryon system is secured. Civilian vessels will not be harmed. Trade may resume under inspection. A murmur of confusion spread through the chamber. The reptilian warlord stepped forward angrily. You invade our territory and speak of inspection? Hayes did not react to his tone. We do not seek destruction of your people, she said evenly. We seek accountability. The Chancellor narrowed his eyes. You lost this war, he replied coldly. Your fleets were broken. Hayes looked directly into the hologram. We lost battles, not the war. Her answer hung in the air. She continued. For 12 cycles you attacked our colonies. You bombarded our cities. You declared humanity a threat to galactic stability. Now you see that we were not the threat. We were preparing. The gray diplomat leaned forward slightly. What are your demands? Hayes paused for a moment before speaking clearly. Recognition of humanity as equal members of the galactic community. Removal of sanctions. Shared control of outer trade routes. And formal acknowledgement that the Council initiated this war. The chamber erupted in protest. Impossible, one leader shouted. They cannot dictate terms, another added. The reptilian warlord's eyes burned with anger. You expect us to kneel? Hayes remained steady. We expect fairness, she replied. If you refuse, we will continue advancing. The transmission ended abruptly. Silence returned once more. The Chancellor slowly walked toward the center of the chamber. He could feel the division among the council members. Some were furious. Others were afraid. A few were thinking carefully. They offer negotiation from a position of strength, the gray diplomat said quietly. That is not weakness. It is strategy. The reptilian warlord slammed his fist again. Strategy or not, we cannot surrender authority to a single species. The Chancellor raised his hand to silence the argument. This is not about surrender, he said slowly. This is about survival. Outside the chamber, panic was spreading among council citizens. News of the Trine defeat had already leaked. Markets were unstable. Outer colonies feared abandonment. Military commanders requested clear orders. The council could not show weakness publicly, yet they could not ignore reality either. Meanwhile, in the Trine system, human forces worked efficiently. Engineers repaired minor damage from the battle. Medical ships treated injured crew members. Supply vessels delivered resources through newly secured routes. Admiral Hayes stood alone for a moment on the observation deck of her flagship, watching the three suns shine across the captured system. She knew the council was divided. That was part of the plan. Humanity had learned that wars were not won only with weapons. They were won with pressure, timing, and unity. A human officer approached her. Admiral, long-range scans show council fleets regrouping near the inner core. Hayes nodded. They will not accept our terms easily. Should we prepare for full assault? The officer asked. Hayes looked at the distant stars calmly. Prepare, yes. Attack, not yet. Back in the Grand Chamber, the debate grew louder. Some leaders argued that accepting human terms would weaken the council's authority permanently. Others warned that continuing the war would risk total collapse. The gray diplomat spoke carefully. If we reject them, they will advance further. They already proved they can break our fleets. The reptilian warlord responded fiercely. Then we gather every ship we have and crush them in one decisive battle. The Chancellor closed his eyes briefly. He understood that a single massive battle would decide everything. But he also understood something else. Humanity was expecting that reaction. They wanted the Council to move emotionally. They wanted them to overextend. When the Chancellor opened his eyes again, his voice was calm but heavy. Prepare both options, he ordered. Continue diplomatic channel, but mobilize all remaining core fleets. The Council obeyed. As fleets across the galaxy began moving toward the inner sectors, tension filled the stars. Humanity had secured Trine. They had forced negotiation, but they also knew the Council's pride would not break easily. And somewhere deep in space, both sides prepared for what could become the largest battle the galaxy had ever seen. Deep inside the captured Trine system, the human Armada continued its work with calm precision. Warships floated in steady formation around the three warp gates, while engineers repaired damage and upgraded defensive platforms. Supply ships moved in organized lines, bringing fuel, ammunition, and medical support. To the outside galaxy, it looked like simple military control. But inside the human fleet, something greater was being prepared. Admiral Elena Hayes stood in a secure briefing chamber aboard her flagship. Around her, senior commanders and scientists watched a three-dimensional tactical map of Council space. The image showed trade routes, fleet movements, and energy patterns across dozens of systems. The Council is gathering forces near their core worlds, one officer reported. At least 4 major fleets are regrouping. Hayes nodded slowly. They will attempt a decisive strike. A young intelligence analyst spoke next. Intercepted communications show internal division. Some leaders want negotiation. Others demand total war. Hayes allowed a small, thoughtful pause. Good, she said quietly. Division creates hesitation. But humanity's greatest strength was not only their ships or weapons. It was preparation and unity. While the Council debated politics, humanity had been building something even more powerful than warships. In a hidden research vessel near Trine's outer orbit, scientists activated a new system. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a network. During the early years of the war, humans had realized that Council fleets depended heavily on centralized command signals. Large flagships, coordinated movements for entire battle groups. If those signals were interrupted, confusion followed. Humans had studied this weakness carefully. They had created a system called Aegis Link. It connected every human ship in a battle group through quantum communication. Even if one command vessel was destroyed, every other ship still received full tactical awareness. There was no single point of failure. On the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Hayes received confirmation. Aegis Link fully operational across all fleets, her communications officer said. Hayes nodded. That is our true advantage. Meanwhile, within the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, tension continued to grow. Reports confirmed that human fleets at Tryon were expanding defensive platforms rather than attacking deeper into Council space. The Grey diplomat studied this carefully. They are strengthening position, he observed. They prepare for our counterattack. The reptilian warlord responded angrily. Then we strike before they are ready. But he underestimated how ready humanity already was. In addition to Aegis Link, human engineers had modified their weapons during the quiet years of preparation. Their new energy cannons could shift frequency mid-fire, making shield adaptation difficult. Their ships were designed with modular armor plates that could be replaced quickly between engagements. Even their smaller fighters carried advanced targeting algorithms that learned from enemy patterns in real time. Yet Admiral Hayes' new technology alone would not win the coming battle. She gathered her senior officers once more. Remember, she said firmly, we do not fight for revenge. We fight to secure our future, protect civilian lanes, avoid unnecessary destruction. Her officers nodded. Human strategy focused not on terror, but on control. In a nearby medical bay, injured crew members from the Battle of Three Suns were being treated. Doctors moved quickly but calmly. A young pilot who had lost his fighter during the battle sat quietly as his injuries were treated. He did not speak of fear. He spoke of returning to duty. This unity, this shared purpose, was something the Council had never fully understood. Humanity did not depend on one leader or one fleet. They depended on collective strength. Days later, long-range scanners detected movement from the Council core sectors. For massive fleets were advancing together. Thousands of warships moved in tight formation toward Tryon. The reptilian warlord had convinced the Council to launch a concentrated strike. They seek one great battle, Hayes said after reviewing the data. They believe numbers will overwhelm us. She turned to her tactical display. Activate secondary defense grid. Around the Tryon system, small hidden satellites powered on. These devices had been quietly deployed after the system was captured. They formed an invisible web between the three suns, capable of distorting targeting signals and amplifying gravity interference. The Council fleets entered the outer edge of Tryon space in perfect military order. Their ships were larger in number than the human defenders. Confidence returned to some Council leaders as they watched the hologram. This will end it, the reptilian warlord declared. But as the fleets advanced, something felt different. Human ships did not rush forward. They remained steady, perfectly aligned. As the first exchange of long-range fire began, the Council noticed something unusual. Their targeting systems flickered. Gravity readings shifted unexpectedly. Their formations struggled to maintain precision. At that exact moment, Aegis Link activated fully. Every human ship shared real-time battlefield data instantly. When one vessel detected shield weakness, the information spread across the fleet in less than a second. Human return fire was precise and synchronized. Instead of chaotic explosions, there were controlled strikes. Council command ships attempted to coordinate response, but interference from the hidden satellite grid weakened their signals. Confusion spread through their lines. In the Grand Chamber, the Chancellor watched the opening minutes of battle with growing dread. Their coordination is perfect, the Grey diplomat whispered. Even when one of their ships falls, the formation remains stable. Indeed, when a human cruiser was destroyed near the front line, nearby vessels instantly adjusted position without breaking structure. There was no panic, no shouting, only adaptation. Admiral Hayes observed the battlefield calmly. Phase 3, she ordered. Several human carriers released advanced strike fighters equipped with new shield-piercing weapons. These fighters did not attack randomly. They targeted communication arrays and engine clusters on key Council ships. Within minutes, portions of the larger enemy fleets began drifting without command signals. The reptilian warlord's confident expression faded as losses increased faster than predicted. "How are they maintaining such control?" he demanded. The answer was simple but terrifying. Humanity had learned. They had evolved during every defeat. They had turned weakness into design. As the Battle of Trion's second wave intensified, both sides understood something clearly. This was no longer a simple conflict of strength. It was a conflict of systems, unity, and preparation. And for the first time since the war began, the Galactic Council realized that humanity's greatest weapon was not a cannon or a fleet. It was the way they fought together. While the massive fleets clashed in the Trion system, far away in the Sol system, Earth stood quiet under a calm blue sky. Cities had been rebuilt after years of war. Defense platforms floated silently in orbit. From a distance, it looked peaceful. Many in the Galactic Council believed Earth was lightly defended now that the human Armada had moved forward. They believed humanity had focused all strength on offense. That belief was their final mistake. Deep within the Council core, a secret order had been approved without full debate. A stealth strike force would bypass Trion using experimental long-range warp jumps. Their mission was simple and brutal: destroy Earth, break human morale, end the war in one strike. The reptilian warlord had supported the plan strongly. "Cut off the head," he had said. "The body will fall." The High Chancellor had not fully agreed, but he allowed it. Desperation was growing. If Earth fell, humanity might lose unity. At least, that was the hope. In deep space, far from major trade routes, a small but powerful Council fleet prepared for the jump. These ships were not numerous, but they were heavily armed. Their hulls were dark and designed to avoid detection. Energy signatures were masked. Commanders aboard those ships believed the human fleet was too far away to respond in time. With a flash of distorted space, the strike force entered warp. Hours later, near the edge of the Sol system, silent distortions appeared beyond Pluto. Council ships exited warp quietly, spreading into attack formation. They expected limited resistance. Instead, their scanners immediately detected something unexpected. Dozens of human defense satellites activated at once. Energy shields shimmered into existence around key planetary positions. Earth was not unprotected. It had been waiting. Inside Earth's orbital command station, General Arjun Malhotra stood calmly before a tactical display. He had remained behind when the Armada moved to Trion. His duty was clear: protect Earth at all costs. Enemy fleet confirmed, an officer reported. Heavy weapons detected. Malhotra nodded once. Activate planetary shield grid. Around Earth, massive shield emitters powered on from hidden positions beneath oceans and mountains. A faint blue glow surrounded the planet like a second atmosphere. The Council strike force hesitated only briefly before launching their attack. Long-range plasma beams shot toward Earth's orbit. The human defense grid intercepted most of the first wave. Explosions flashed across space as orbital platforms returned fire. The Council commanders quickly realized this was not a weak homeworld. Earth's defenses were layered and modern. While the Armada fought openly at Trion, Earth had been quietly transformed into a fortress. Malhotra issued comm orders. Release interceptor squadrons. From hidden hangars on the far side of the moon, hundreds of human fighters launched into space. They moved in tight formations, supported by automated defense drones. The Council strike fleet attempted to push through the outer defense ring, focusing fire on shield generators. One generator station was hit heavily and exploded in bright fragments. A section of the planetary shield flickered. Council ships aimed their main cannons at the exposed area. But before they could fire again, heavy human cruisers emerged from behind the moon. These ships had remained hidden to avoid early detection. Their engines burned bright as they accelerated directly into the Council formation. The surprise forced the alien fleet to split focus. Some ships continued attacking Earth, while others turned to face the cruisers. In the confusion, human fighters struck engine systems and communication relays. Several Council vessels lost coordination. In orbit above Earth, debris began to fill space. Yet human defense remained organized. Even as one platform was destroyed, others adjusted shield coverage instantly. Malhotra monitored every shift through the Aegis Link network. Earth's defense grid was fully integrated with the Armada system. Every ship, satellite, and station shared data. A Council flagship moved aggressively toward low orbit, attempting to break through by sheer force. Its cannons charged with intense energy. Malhotra gave a direct order. Target flagship, full battery. Hidden rail cannons embedded within asteroids near Mars activated. Massive projectiles accelerated at extreme speed. The Council flagship detected them too late. The first impact shattered its forward shields. The second tore through its hull. The ship split apart in silent explosion. The remaining Council vessels hesitated. Their surprise attack had failed. They had expected panic. Instead, they faced preparation. A final desperate volley was fired toward Earth's surface, but the shield grid absorbed it with heavy strain. Oceans beneath the shield shimmered from the energy impact, but the planet remained unharmed. Council commanders ordered retreat. Their stealth advantage was gone. Human reinforcements from nearby patrol sectors were already approaching. As the alien fleet attempted warp escape, several ships were disabled and captured. The rest fled into deep space. On Earth, cheers did not erupt. There was no celebration, only relief and renewed focus. Malhotra looked at the damaged orbital station quietly. "Begin repairs," he said. "Prepare for second wave." Though the attack had failed, its message was clear. The Council was desperate enough to target civilians directly. News of the failed strike reached Admiral Hayes at Tryon. She listened carefully as reports described the defense. Her expression hardened slightly, but her voice remained calm. "They aim for morale," she said. "They failed. The attempted destruction of Earth had changed something important. Humanity had offered negotiation." The Council responded with an assassination strike. Across the fleet, resolve grew stronger. Back in the Grand Chamber, the Chancellor received confirmation that the strike force had been defeated. He closed his eyes briefly. The warlord said nothing this time. The attempt to break humanity had only strengthened them. And now, as human fleets continued to hold Tryon and Earth remained secure, the Council understood the truth. Humanity was not fighting only with ships. They were fighting with unity, preparation, and patience. And Earth, the world they had once toasted as fallen, was now untouchable. The failure of the strike on Earth changed the balance of the war more than any battle before it. Across Council space, fear began to replace pride. The news spread quickly through military channels and civilian networks. Earth had survived. The stealth fleet had been destroyed or captured. The plan to break human morale had failed completely. Inside the Grand Chamber, the golden walls no longer felt powerful. They felt heavy. The High Chancellor stood before the central hologram as new reports arrived every minute. Human forces still held the Trine system. Council fleets had suffered heavy losses in the second wave battle. And now Earth itself had proven impossible to strike without massive cost. The reptilian warlord remained silent this time. His earlier confidence had faded. The gray diplomat spoke quietly. They offered negotiation. We answered with assassination. Now we face the consequences. The Chancellor did not respond immediately. He stared at the hologram as it shifted to show something new. Human warp signatures were appearing beyond Tryon, not retreating, advancing. System by system, the human armada began moving deeper into Council territory. They did not burn planets. They did not destroy civilian stations. Instead, they disabled military outposts and secured trade routes. Their movement was steady and controlled. It was not invasion for destruction. It was pressure. On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Elena Hayes watched the updated star map. Several Council border systems were now under human observation. "Advance at measured pace," she ordered. Avoid civilian harm. Disable military resistance only. Human captains obeyed without hesitation. In one council system, orbital defense cannons powered up as human ships arrived. Instead of opening fire immediately, Hayes sent a broadcast across open frequency. Civilian vessels are free to leave. Military assets will be disabled. Resistance will result in destruction. Many council commanders were unsure how to respond. They had expected human fury after the attack on Earth. Instead, they faced calm determination. Some systems surrendered without battle. Others fought briefly before being overwhelmed by coordinated human strikes. Each victory tightened the circle around the Council's core worlds. In the Grand Chamber, panic slowly spread among the leaders. Outer colonies began demanding protection that could no longer be guaranteed. Supply shortages grew as trade routes were disrupted. We must gather all remaining fleets at the capital, the reptilian warlord finally said. Make a final stand. The gray diplomat looked at the Chancellor carefully. And if we lose? He asked. The Chancellor's silence was answer enough. Days later, the human Armada arrived at the outer defense perimeter of the Council capital system. It was the heart of their civilization. Massive orbital rings surrounded the central planet. Shipyards floated in protective arcs. Defensive platforms bristled with weapons. This was the strongest fortress the Council possessed. Human ships exited warp in organized waves. Thousands of dark hulls formed a vast line across space. Blue engine light reflected against the metal surfaces of the Council's defenses. The scale of the human fleet was undeniable now. They had not shown all their strength at Tryon. This was the full Armada. In the Grand Chamber below, the High Chancellor felt the weight of reality. The hologram displayed human forces surrounding the capital at safe distance. They were not firing. They were waiting. A transmission request appeared. The Chancellor knew who it would be. Admiral Hayes appeared once again, her uniform clean and composed. "Galactic Council," she said calmly. "Your fleets are defeated. Your capital is surrounded. We will not attack unless forced." Murmurs filled the chamber. The reptilian warlord stepped forward angrily. "You dare threaten our home?" Hayes answered without raising her voice. "You attacked ours." Silence followed. Hayes continued. "We have no desire to destroy your people. But this war ends now. Recognize humanity as equal. Accept responsibility for initiating this conflict. Agree to shared governance of outer trade regions." The Chancellor felt pride struggle against logic inside him. For cycles, the Council had ruled without challenge. To admit fault would damage their authority. But to refuse now could mean destruction. The gray diplomat spoke quietly to him. "They're offering peace from a position of power. That is rare." Above the capital world, human battleships adjusted positions slightly. Not aggressively, just enough to show readiness. The Aegis Link network kept every vessel synchronized. One command from Hayes could begin a bombardment that would break the defensive ring within minutes. The Chancellor finally addressed the hologram directly. "If we accept," he asked slowly, "do you withdraw?" Hayes answered without hesitation. "Yes. Once terms are signed and verified, we withdraw to neutral boundaries. We seek stability, not conquest." The reptilian warlord protested. "This is surrender." The Chancellor turned toward him. "No," he said quietly. "This is survival." Around the chamber, other leaders began to understand. Humanity had not come to wipe them out. They had come to force change. The arrogance that once defined the Council now felt fragile. Outside, human ships held their positions in silent strength. There were no wild movements, no chaotic displays, just patience. Admiral Hayes waited. She knew this moment was more powerful than any battle. Fear could break enemies, but restraint could reshape them. Hours passed as the Council debated. Civilian leaders sent urgent pleas for peace. Military commanders reported that defensive systems could not withstand full human assault. Slowly, pride gave way to reason. Finally, the High Chancellor stood before the chamber and spoke the words he never imagined he would say. "Prepare formal negotiation channels." Above the capital world, human sensors detected increased communication traffic, but no weapon charge. Hayes allowed herself a slow breath. The fall of arrogance did not come with explosion or fire. It came with acceptance. Humanity had surrounded the most powerful government in the galaxy and chosen not to destroy it. And in that choice, they proved something greater than military strength. They proved control. The Council's capital system was eerily quiet now. The defensive rings still glowed with energy, but the tension in space was palpable. Thousands of human ships held position, perfectly aligned, engines humming in quiet synchronization. From a central command tower, the High Chancellor and his advisors watched every movement, knowing that any wrong calculation could mean annihilation. Reports came in constantly. Council fleets outside the capital had either surrendered, retreated, or been disabled. The human armada had not destroyed them. They had controlled them. The Chancellor understood fully now that humanity's strength lay not only in firepower, but in strategy, patience, and unity. He turned toward the reptilian warlord, who had remained silent, claws folded tensely. "This is no ordinary siege," the Chancellor said. "They're teaching us a lesson." The warlord's tail lashed behind him. "We must strike," he hissed. "We cannot allow them to dictate terms." The Chancellor shook his head slowly. "We have already lost the initiative. If we attack recklessly, we risk the capital." Meanwhile, in orbit around the Council's homeworld, Admiral Elena Hayes observed the holographic map of the system. Her fleet moved subtly, maintaining pressure without aggression. Smaller detachments patrolled warp corridors and key orbital stations. Every human ship was connected through Aegis Link. The Council could see the fleet's size, but they could not comprehend its coordination. Hayes addressed her officers calmly. "Phase 5 begins. Maintain formation. Disable only what threatens civilians. Continue monitoring Council response." Across the galaxy, news of human victories and the capture of key systems spread rapidly. Outer colonies that had been neutral or fearful now sent messages of support to human forces. Humanity was not only defeating the Council's fleets, they were inspiring hope. Inside the Grand Chamber, debate raged. Some leaders demanded surrender. Others wanted to fight to the last vessel. The Chancellor knew that continuing armed resistance was dangerous. Every Council fleet that remained risked destruction. A signal appeared on the holographic map, and the room fell silent. Admiral Hayes had requested a direct communication link. She appeared on the display, calm and unwavering. "High Chancellor," she said, her voice measured. "The time for escalation has passed. You have the option to end this conflict peacefully." The reptilian warlord bared his teeth. "You encircle our homeworld and speak of peace." Hayes did not flinch. "We do not threaten your people. We seek only recognition and accountability. Refusal will force us to disable remaining defenses." She paused to let her words settle. "This is your final warning." The Chancellor leaned heavily on the podium. He understood the position. Accepting terms would mean acknowledging past errors and granting humanity equal status in the galaxy. Refusing could bring devastation. Outside the capital, human forces shifted subtly, demonstrating readiness without aggression. Their power was clear, yet controlled. Within minutes, a few minor warships from the Council attempted minor attacks on patrol points, but each was intercepted carefully by human vessels. None were destroyed unnecessarily. Their engines were disabled, weapons neutralized, and crews captured. The Chancellor studied the battlefield. He realized that humanity's goal was not conquest, but order. They had demonstrated strength, inflicted no unnecessary civilian harm, and held the capacity to destroy if challenged. Slowly, he turned to the Council advisors. "We must negotiate," he said quietly. "There is no other option." Murmurs of relief and protest filled the chamber. The warlord's claws flexed with tension, but even he could not argue effectively against reality. Back in the fleet, Hayes allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The Council had underestimated humanity repeatedly. They had attacked Earth directly, believing it unprotected. They had ignored human preparation, alliances, and strategy. Each mistake had been anticipated and countered. Her officers remained focused, monitoring energy grids, warp signatures, and fleet readiness. Every human vessel maintained discipline. There was no overconfidence, no recklessness. When the Chancellor finally opened the channel, he spoke slowly. "We are prepared to discuss terms," he said. Hayes nodded slightly. "Very well. We will proceed with negotiations. All fleets will maintain current positions. No aggression will occur unless provoked." The Chancellor exhaled. The decision would not be easy. Accepting humanity's terms meant restructuring centuries of galactic policy, acknowledging that humans were not merely survivors but equals. Yet refusal risked complete destruction of remaining forces. Across the capital orbit, the Council's major military stations remained active but unengaged. Human ships held the perimeter. Their weapons were ready but not fired. It was a demonstration of control and restraint. For the first time, Council leaders could understand the full extent of what they were facing. Humanity had not only defeated fleets and systems, they had enforced a moral framework on the battlefield. Their terms were fair, their tactics precise, and their will unshakable. Over the next few hours, emissaries from both sides met in secure channels. Humans outlined conditions, recognition of humanity as equals, withdrawal of unjust sanctions, shared governance over key trade routes, and formal acknowledgement that the Council initiated conflict. Council negotiators argued, but gradually conceded. Humanity's position was unassailable. On the bridge of her flagship, Hayes monitored every exchange. Her voice remained calm as she instructed officers to maintain readiness. "Ensure security of all negotiators," she said. "We do not provoke, but we must be prepared." Slowly, the Council capitulated. Their pride was wounded, but their civilization survived. Humanity had surrounded their capital, demonstrated overwhelming strength, defended Earth successfully, and forced the most powerful species in the galaxy to accept terms without destroying a single planet unnecessarily. The Chancellor signed the final agreement. Human emissaries confirmed the terms. The human armada began to shift formation, moving gradually away from the capital system. Their mission of control and demonstration was complete. Humanity had won, not through blind aggression, but through patience, strategy, and unity. In the Grand Chamber, silence fell. Leaders looked at one another, realizing the true power of the species they had tried to extinguish. Humanity had taught them a lesson that would echo across generations. They had proven that strength alone did not define supremacy. Discipline, preparation, and moral purpose did. And in that moment, the galaxy began to understand what it meant to face the united force of humanity. With the final agreement signed, the galaxy entered a new era of uneasy peace. The human armada began a slow, controlled withdrawal from the Council's capital system. Ships moved in perfect formation, engines glowing softly against the black void of space. Their presence still dominated every scanner, a quiet reminder of the cost of resistance. Admiral Elena Hayes remained on the bridge of her flagship, observing the Council fleets as they returned to their stations, humbled and cautious. She allowed herself a single deep breath, but her mind was already planning the next phase of humanity's strategy. The war was over, yet the lessons of survival, preparation, and unity were never forgotten. Earth's orbit remained fortified, though now some human ships returned to patrol duties near outer colonies. The population of Earth watched the skies cautiously but with pride. Cities had been rebuilt quickly after years of conflict, and defense systems remained active as a reminder that humanity had survived against impossible odds. Inside Trion and other captured systems, human engineers continued to enhance stations, repair minor damage, and strengthen communication networks. The Aegis Link remained fully operational, ensuring that every human ship and station could respond instantly to any threat. Admiral Hayes held briefings with commanders regularly, emphasizing vigilance and discipline. "We have won battles," she said, "but the galaxy is still full of those who underestimate us. Never relax." Inside the Council's capital, the atmosphere was tense and solemn. Leaders moved with caution, and military commanders reorganized remaining fleets to reinforce morale. For centuries, they had ruled with confidence and authority. Now, their understanding of humanity had shifted. It was not merely a species that survived. It was a species that planned, adapted, and executed with precision. Fear replaced arrogance, and the concept of dominance had changed. The High Chancellor, once proud and commanding, now worked carefully with advisors to restructure policies. Decisions were slower, more calculated. Every move accounted for potential human intervention. The gray diplomat observed the Council's transformation quietly. "They did not destroy us," he said softly to the Chancellor, "but they have changed how we must govern the galaxy." Even the reptilian warlord, once fierce and unyielding, had become cautious. The failure of the strike on Earth and the loss at Tryon had humbled him. For the first time, he considered restraint and negotiation as practical tools, not signs of weakness. Meanwhile, human forces continued quiet operations in nearby systems. Some fleets provided protection for neutral trade routes. Others monitored potential insurgent groups or rogue fleets attempting to exploit the Council's weakened state. Humans were not conquering planets unnecessarily. They were enforcing stability and preparing for potential future threats. Communication networks connected with allied species who had secretly supported humanity during the war. These species were now openly recognized, their loyalty rewarded. Across the galaxy, news of humanity's victories and diplomacy spread. Many systems previously under Council influence began requesting trade agreements, military alliances, or protection. Humanity had proven itself both formidable and fair. The era of intimidation was over. The era of respect and cautious cooperation had begun. On Earth, Admiral Hayes convened a final strategy meeting with her senior commanders. "We have achieved what many said was impossible," she said. "But do not forget the cost. Every ship we lost, every life we risked has taught us something. We are stronger, smarter, and united. That is our true advantage." Officers nodded, understanding that their survival depended not on individual skill alone, but on collective coordination and discipline. The Aegis link continued to transmit quietly across the fleet, a reminder that humanity's unity was not temporary but permanent. Back in the Council's capital, the Chancellor reviewed the final reports. Entire fleets had been neutralized, systems had shifted control, and the Council's pride had been humbled. Yet their civilization remained intact. That delicate balance was now maintained by humanity's oversight and continued presence. The Chancellor recognized that future conflicts would be measured, that no species would underestimate humans again. In distant space, human ships returned to patrol and training exercises, maintaining readiness while demonstrating restraint. The galaxy could see their strength without suffering unnecessary destruction. The combination of preparation, discipline, and moral strategy had ensured that humanity emerged victorious in both battle and diplomacy. Admiral Hayes stood alone on the observation deck of her flagship, watching the stars stretch endlessly before her. The galaxy had been changed forever. Humanity had survived annihilation, outmaneuvered the most powerful species in existence, and forced recognition without compromising its principles. Her thoughts drifted briefly to the future. The Council would recover, of course. They always did, but they would never act with the same arrogance. Humanity's lessons would echo for generations. The fleet was not celebrating, but there was quiet pride among the officers. They had followed orders, executed strategy, and preserved life while enforcing dominance. That was the victory that mattered most. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, other species who had watched the conflict unfold took note. Humanity was no longer just a planet of survivors. They were a force to be respected, a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and discipline. And as Admiral Hayes turned back to the bridge, her eyes scanned the vastness of space. She knew one truth above all. Humanity had faced the impossible and emerged not only alive but stronger than ever. The galaxy had changed, the Council had learned, and humanity's rise was only beginning. In the quiet that followed the last formal agreements, ships moved steadily through warp lanes, systems were stabilized, and the human armada held vigil across the stars. Peace had returned, fragile but real, and humanity's future shone brighter than any star.